The stars above Zelari Prime shone brightly in the dark sky. The planet was home to one of the oldest and strongest alien empires in the galaxy, the Zelari Empire. Their people were tall, proud, and full of power. They had conquered many planets. They believed no race was greater than them. On this calm night, something strange happened. A bright light flashed across the sky. It was a crashing ship, burning like fire as it fell from the heavens. The guards in the royal tower watched it fall with fear and confusion. "An unknown craft has entered our skies," shouted a soldier. "Prepare. Capture teams," another one ordered. "It might be dangerous." Far away in the forests outside the capital city, the ship finally crashed. Smoke filled the air. Flames danced around the broken parts. Inside the wreck, one figure slowly pulled himself out. He was bleeding, tired, covered in dirt. His name was Commander Ray Carter, a human. Ray coughed hard and looked up at the two moons of the alien world. His ship was gone. His team was gone. And now he was completely alone on a hostile planet. He didn't know what the aliens here would do to him, but he smiled. "At least I'm not dead," he whispered to himself. Moments later, Zelari soldiers surrounded him with glowing weapons. They pointed them at his head. One of them ordered. Neil. Ray stayed standing. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "But I don't kneel for anyone." The soldiers looked at each other, surprised. No one had ever dared speak like that to them. "Take him to the palace," the captain said. "The queen will decide what to do." Inside the royal palace, made of shining crystal and gold, Princess Arya Zealand sat quietly in her private chamber. She was young, intelligent, and curious. Unlike others in her race, she didn't always agree with how the empire ruled. She believed in asking questions. She believed in change. When the guards brought news of a captured human, she was surprised. "A human?" she asked. "Here, yes, princess. He survived a crash. He refused to kneel. He is being held now." "Bring him to me," Arya said. Now, in a few minutes, Ray was brought into the chamber. He had chains on his hands, but he stood tall. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, but his eyes were calm and strong. Arya looked at him with interest. "You are human?" she asked. "That's right," Ray replied. "Name's Ray Carter. You have no fear," she said. "Even now, I've seen worse," he replied with a small smile. "You're not the scariest alien I've met." That made Arya raise her eyebrow. She didn't expect a joke. Most aliens who came here begged for mercy or cried in fear. But this human was different. "You know where you are?" she asked. "Zelari Prime, home of the mighty Zelari. Empire? Yeah, I've heard stories. And you are not afraid?" "I'm alive. That's enough for now," Rhea told the guards to remove his chains. They hesitated, but followed her command. Ray rubbed his wrists. "I won't kill your people," he said. "I'm just trying to survive." "You crashed here," Arya said slowly. "That means your ship failed. I was on a deep space mission. Something went wrong. I lost everything. My crew, my ship, I was lucky to escape." Arya looked at him closely. There was sadness in his voice, but no weakness. "Why didn't you kneel when my guards told you to?" she asked. Ray looked into her eyes. "Because where I come from, we stand, even when it hurts." For the next hour, Arya asked many questions. Ray answered most of them. He talked about Earth, humans, space travel, and how they learned by making mistakes. He told her about music, laughter, pain, and dreams. Arya listened carefully. She found herself enjoying his words. He spoke with emotion, something rare in her world. Zelari were known for being logical and cold. But Ray was different. He was warm, even after losing everything. "You speak with fire in your heart," she said softly. "I speak because I care," he answered. Later, Arya walked to her private garden. The night air was cool. Flowers from distant planets glowed in the moonlight. "Why did your people come to space?" she asked. "To learn," he said. "To grow. To connect. We're not perfect, but we try. That's what makes us human. Arya stood in silence. She had met many beings across the galaxy, but none like him. None with such hope. You should. Fear us, she said. My mother might destroy you tomorrow. Ray looked at the sky. Maybe, he said, but today I'm still here. Just then, a royal guard ran toward the garden. Princess, the queen commands your presence. She wants to see the human, ... Now, Arya nodded. Tell her I'll bring him myself. As the guard left, Arya turned to Ray. She saw something in him that she couldn't explain. Strength without violence. Kindness without weakness. You are strange, human, she said. Ray chuckled. Most of us are. Arya smiled. It was the first time in days. Come, she said. Let's see what my mother thinks of you. Together, they walked back toward the palace, and somewhere deep inside her heart, Arya knew this human would change everything. The crystal doors of the throne room opened with a soft hum. Princess Arya stepped inside with Commander Ray Carter walking beside her. The guards at the door looked nervous.
No outsider, especially a human,
had ever walked so freely through.
The palace, at the far end, sitting high on her glowing throne, was Queen Zealand, ruler of the mighty Zelari Empire.
Aye.
Her eyes were sharp, her voice was cold. She watched the human approach with silent judgment. Ray stood tall, his hands behind his back. His uniform was still dirty from the crash, but he didn't care. Wasn't here to impress anyone. Arya stopped a few steps before the queen and bowed. My queen. This is the human I told you about, she said respectfully. Queen Zealand raised an eyebrow. So this is the creature who refused to kneel? Ray gave a small smile. That's me. The queen stared at him for a long time. You are weak. Your race is young. Why do you think you deserve to speak in my court? Ray didn't look away. Because words matter, even to empires. There was silence in the room. A few nobles gasped. A human speaking to the queen like this. Impossible. But Zealand didn't react. She only waved her hand. Take him back too. His room, she said. Let the princess play with her new toy a little longer. Ray didn't answer. He just turned and walked out with the guards. Arya followed, her face unreadable. That evening, in a quiet chamber high in the palace tower, Ray sat near a large window. The twin moons of Zelari Prime shone brightly outside. Arya entered with a tray of food. I hope you like strange alien fruit, she said, placing the tray beside him. Ray grinned. If it doesn't kill me, I'll try it. They both laughed softly. It was a warm sound in a cold palace. Days passed. Arya visited Ray every day. They talked for hours. At first, it was about human things, Earth's history, music, stories, and strange customs. Ray told her about Earth's wars and peace, victories and losses, mistakes and hopes. He told her how humans fought, not just with weapons, but also with ideas, how they built great cities, made art, and sent machines to stars. One day, Arya asked, Your people sound broken, yet full of dreams? Why do you believe in peace so much, after so many wars? Ray looked at her and said, Because we know the pain of war. That's why peace is precious. Arya began to change. She started reading human books in her chamber. She asked her droids to play Earth music. She wore simpler clothes, more like Ray's, her guards noticed. The servants whispered. One evening, Ray showed her an old Earth poem. It was about hope and stars. Arya listened quietly, then asked, Is it true that your people look at the sky and wish? Ray nodded. Always, even when the sky is full of fire. But not everyone liked this change. The Zelari nobles began to talk behind Arya's back. The princess is being fooled, they said. This human is dangerous. Some even sent secret messages to the queen. One day the queen called Arya to her private garden. The air was heavy with silence. You are spending too much time with the human, Queen Zealand said. He is not just a human, Arya replied. He is kind, brave, and wise. He is a threat, the queen said. He is teaching you weakness. No, Arya said firmly. He is teaching me strength, the strength to feel, to think, to choose. The queen said nothing more, but her eyes turned cold. Back in the tower, Ray was fixing a broken holotable. Arya returned, her face quiet. "Mother is angry," she said. "I figured," Ray replied. "Royal mothers never like me." Arya laughed, but her eyes were sad. "She doesn't understand you," she said. "She doesn't need to," Ray said. "Gently, only you do." Later that night, Arya sneaked Ray out of the tower. They moved through secret halls and quiet gardens. Finally, they reached the palace roof, a wide-open space under the stars. "Wow," Ray whispered, looking at the night sky. The stars over Zellery Prime were brighter than any he had ever seen. Galaxies spun like jewels across the sky. "This is my favorite place," Arya said. "No walls, no guards, just the stars." Ray sat beside her. "Do you believe your world can change?" he asked. Arya was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I never used to. But now, I think it's possible." "Good," Ray said, "because change starts with one voice, one step." They sat there for a long time. Arya leaned her head on Ray's shoulder. For the first time in her royal life, she felt free, not because of her title, but because of this strange human who had nothing, gave everything through his words. But peace never lasts forever. The next morning, alarms echoed through the palace. A warship from a rival empire had entered Zellari's space. The queen called. For a meeting, she blamed Ray's presence. "Its ideas have made us weak," she said. "Our enemies smell fear." She gave a final order. "Remove the human. Send him to the prison asteroid. Let this nonsense end." Arya tried to stop it. She begged. She argued. But the queen's will was law. When the guards came for Ray, he didn't fight. He only looked at Arya and smiled sadly. "Don't be afraid to change your world," he said. Then they took him away, and Arya stood alone, staring at the sky, where hope had once shone like a star. The silence in the palace was thick. Princess Arya stood in the throne room, her heart heavy. The queen's orders had been clear. Commander Ray Carter, the human who had taught her so much, was to be sent away, was a threat to the Empire. Arya had tried to protest, but nothing could stop her mother's will. Ray was going to the prison asteroid, a place where even the strongest beings would break. She watched the guards take Ray away. He didn't resist. He didn't beg. He only smiled at her, a smile filled with both sadness and strength. "Don't worry, princess. I'm not afraid," he had said, "and I'll be fine. Don't give up on your world." But Arya felt lost. She had spent so many days talking to Ray, learning from him. His ideas had opened her mind in ways she'd never thought possible. He had shown her that strength wasn't just in power, was in kindness, courage, and the ability to see beyond the surface. The prison asteroid was far from Zellery Prime. Hidden in a cold and desolate part of space, the ship carrying Ray was guarded by dozens of Zellery soldiers. He sat quietly in his cell, staring out into the void of space. The prison was a place of darkness, with high walls and unending cold. But even here, Ray's mind stayed sharp. He knew the odds were against him. The queen would want him to suffer, but Ray wasn't just any prisoner. He was human, and that meant he had something the Zellari didn't: hope inside his cell. Ray began to speak with the other prisoners of alien races from across the galaxy, all captured by the Zellari Empire. They were beaten, starved, and treated like animals. But Ray saw something in them, something that had been buried by fear and pain. "We don't have to be enemies," Ray told them. "I know we've been divided, but we can unite. We can escape this place." At first, the prisoners were doubtful. They'd been here too long, some for decades, were broken, lost in their own despair. But Ray didn't give up on them. He told them stories of Earth, of humans who overcame impossible odds. He taught them the power of unity, of standing together. Slowly, the prisoners began to listen. They began to see that they didn't have to be weak. They were more than their scars. They were more than their chains. Back on Zellari Prime, princess? Arya couldn't stop thinking about Ray. Every day, she walked the halls of the palace, but her mind was far away, in the cold emptiness of space. She tried to speak with the queen, to convince her that Ray wasn't a threat. But the Queen's heart had already hardened. Your human friend is dangerous, Arya. He has made you weak. You must forget him. And the Queen's words were cold, cutting through Arya like ice. But Arya couldn't forget. She remembered his smile, his courage, and his belief in something better. She couldn't let him rot on that prison asteroid. One night, when the palace was quiet and everyone else slept, Arya made her decision. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act. She called for a meeting with her most trusted generals. General Karn, a fierce warrior, looked at her with concern. "Princess, you are asking for trouble," Karn warned. "The Queen will never forgive you for this. If we defy her, then we defy her," Arya said, her voice firm. "I am the heir to the throne. I make the decisions now." Karn hesitated. The Queen was the ultimate ruler of the Zelari Empire. But there was something in Arya's eyes, something that made him believe in her. He stood up, bowing his head. "What do you need from us, Princess?" Arya smiled. "We need a ship. We need a free Ray." Meanwhile, on the prison asteroid, things were starting to change. Ray had gathered a small group of prisoners, a mix of aliens from different worlds. They weren't ready to escape yet, but Ray had begun to plant the seeds of resistance. They no longer saw themselves as weak victims. They saw themselves as equals. They saw themselves as fighters. One night, while the guards were distracted, Ray and his group snuck into the control room of the prison. They didn't have weapons, but they had something more powerful: unity. Ray used the old human skills he had learned, his knowledge of technology, his ability to think quickly, and his courage in the face of danger. They managed to disable the prison's security systems. Alarms went off, but by then it was too late. The prisoners were free, but Ray knew their freedom would be short-lived. The Zelari would come for them. They would come with full force. He needed to act quickly. "We have to go back to Zelari Prime," he told his group. "We don't just escape. We show them that we can live together, humans and aliens, that we are stronger together than apart." The prisoners agreed. They weren't just running anymore. They were fighting for a new future. Back on Zelari Prime, Arya's plan was set into motion. She had secretly arranged for a small stealth ship to be prepared. With the help of General Karn and a few loyal soldiers, she managed to sneak away from the palace. They flew through the galaxy, heading straight for the prison asteroid. When they arrived, the sight that greeted them was both terrifying and hopeful. The prison was in chaos. Prisoners were fighting for their freedom, and Ray was at the center of it all. He was leading them, showing them how to be brave, how to fight for what was right. Arya knew this was the moment. She had to reach him before it was too late. Ray turned when he heard a ship approaching. At first, he thought it was another attack. But then he saw the Zelari flag. His heart skipped a beat. Was it the Queen? Or had Arya come for him? The ship landed, and the door opened. Arya stepped out, her eyes filled with determination. "Ray." She called softly. Ray's face broke into a smile. He couldn't believe it. She had come for him. "You're not alone," Arya said. "We can do this together." The quiet hum of the stealth ship filled the air as Princess Arya stared out at the distant prison asteroid. The stars twinkled around them, distant and cold. Her heart pounded with fear and hope that she had made the right choice, and fear of what might happen when they arrived. The ship had been traveling for hours, but it still felt like they had only just begun. General Karn was at the controls, his face grim as they neared the asteroid. His eyes occasionally flicked to the princess, who sat with her arms crossed, thinking deeply. The plan had been simple: sneak in, free Ray and the prisoners, and escape before the Zelari fleet could react. But the more Arya thought about it, the more complicated it seemed. What if they failed? What if the Queen, her mother, found out? Arya had never defied her like this before. Zellar Empire was built on order, on strength, and on obedience. But Ray had shown her a different way, the way of hope. And now, she couldn't go back. Back on the prison asteroid, Ray had already started organizing the prisoners. He was no longer just a lone human. He was a leader, someone they all trusted. His words were powerful, and his belief in a better, Future was contagious. Everyone listen, Ray said, his voice carrying across the dark hallway. We don't just escape. We fight for something bigger. We fight for freedom, for unity. The Zelari think we're weak. They think we're broken. But we're not. Together, we are stronger than they could ever understand. The prisoners nodded, a sense of determination building among them. They weren't just looking for a way out anymore. They were fighting for something real, something worth standing up for. Ray and his group carefully made their way to the prison's main control room. They had to disable the security systems completely before they could escape. If they didn't, they'd be trapped. The alarms would sound, and the Zelari soldiers would flood in. It wasn't easy. The guards were everywhere, but Ray was clever. Using the knowledge he had from his time on Zelari Prime, he managed to outsmart them, cutting the power to the prison's security grid. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was enough. We have a chance, Ray said, turning to the prisoners, but we need to move fast. In the ship, Arya looked over at General Karn. His face was serious as he checked the ship's instruments. They were getting closer. Princess, we're approaching the asteroid, Karn said, his voice steady. Are you sure about this? Arya nodded. She wasn't scared anymore. She'd made her choice. I'm sure, she replied. Ray is fighting for a better future for everyone. We can't let him do it alone. The ship drew closer to the prison, and Arya felt a cold chill in the pit of her stomach. She wasn't sure what would happen once they landed. One thing was clear: the future of her people, of the galaxy. It might depend on what happened in the next few hours. When the ship landed, Ray and his group were already waiting. The moment the hatch opened, Arya saw him standing there, leading the prisoners, a look of determination on his face. He had already done so much. Now all they had to do was finish it. Ray, Arya called out. Ray turned, his face breaking into a smile when he saw her. You made it, he said, stepping toward her. Arya ran to him, and for a moment, nothing else mattered. The galaxy could burn, the Empire could fall, but in that moment, they were together. You came for me, Ray said softly, his voice full of wonder. Not just for you, Arya replied. For all of us. Ray nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. Then let's finish this. The situation was tense. The prison was on high alert, and they knew the Zelari Empire wouldn't wait long to send a fleet. The fleet, Arya, and the prisoners moved quickly. They worked together, using their combined strength to overpower the remaining guards and secure the control room inside. Ray went to work, tapping into the prison's systems. He wasn't a tech expert, but he had learned a lot during his time. On Zelari Prime, with the help of a few of the prisoners, they managed to gain control of the comms system. Ray broadcasted a message across the prison and to anyone listening across the galaxy. We are not enemies, Ray's voice echoed. We are not your pets. We are people, and we are free. This is the beginning of something new. Stand together, human and alien, for peace, for freedom. The message was simple but powerful. Back on Zelari Prime, Queen Zelen watched the broadcast with growing anger. She had not expected this. A human, an outsider, uniting the prisoners. It's the audacity of it. How dare they? The Queen hissed. Standing up from her throne, how dare they challenge me? One of her advisors stepped forward. Your Majesty, we must send the fleet. We cannot allow this rebellion to spread. The Queen narrowed her eyes, but there was a flicker of doubt in her mind. Could it be? Could a human really change the course of her empire? Could a single act of defiance spark a revolution? She looked at the screen again. The prisoners were free. The ships were ready. It was happening. The question now was not whether she could stop them. It was whether she could stop herself from destroying everything she had built. On the asteroid, Ray and Arya shared a quiet moment amidst the chaos. It's happening, Arya said softly. Her hand resting on his Ray looked at her, his eyes full of hope. It's just the beginning. Arya took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she had never felt before. She had made her choice. There was no turning back now. Then, let's make it count, she said. Together. They turned to face the future where they would stand, not just as a princess and a human, but as partners. Together, they would face the challenges ahead. Together, they would change the galaxy. The tension in the royal palace was suffocating. Queen Zealand sat upon her throne, her face stone cold, her eyes filled with rage and confusion. The grand hall was filled with her closest advisors, military leaders, and noble families. They all waited, silent, as the news came in from the outer reaches of the Empire. "The prisoners have escaped, Your Majesty," the commander of the royal guard said, his voice trembling. "And the human... he is leading them. We've lost control of the prison asteroid. What is this madness?" The queen's voice cut through the room like a blade. "How did this happen? Single human." Her anger was clear, but so was the disbelief. In her voice, the Zellery Empire, vast and mighty, had never been challenged like this. And now, the person responsible for it was Ray Carter, a human. A race she had always considered inferior, weak, and unworthy of her attention. She turned her sharp gaze to her daughter, Princess Arya, who had been silent throughout the meeting. "How could you allow this?" The queen's voice was low and dangerous. "You, of all people, should know that this human has no place in our world." Arya stood tall before her mother. Her hands were clasped tightly behind her back, but there was no fear in her eyes, there was only determination. "You're wrong, Mother," Arya said, her voice calm but firm. "Ray has shown me something you've never seen. He has taught me that humans are not what you think they are. They're strong in ways we don't understand." The queen's eyes narrowed. "He's a prisoner," she spat. "A criminal. Everything I've built." "No, he's not a threat," Arya replied. "He's a symbol of hope, showing us that we don't have to follow the old ways. We don't have to be ruled by fear and power." For the first time, the queen hesitated. She had spent her entire life building an empire that relied on strength, control, and dominance. But Ray had challenged that. His message of unity, of peaceful rebellion, was beginning to spread. People were starting to listen not just to the message, but to him. "You have become weak, Arya," the queen said coldly. "Your feelings for this human cloud your judgment." Arya didn't flinch. "I've seen too much, Mother. I've seen how your rule has crushed the people. The weak have no voice here, but I believe they should. I believe the future of our empire can be different. It starts with this human." Ray stood at the center of the room in the royal palace, surrounded by a small group of prisoners, his allies, all of whom had risked everything to join him. They were ready. Together, they had fought through the prison's defenses and escaped. But now, they were standing in the heart of the empire. The odds against them were higher than ever, but Ray felt no fear. He had come a long way from the crash landing on Zellery Prime. He had learned more than he ever imagined about the Zellery, about their pride, their power, their empire. But he had also learned something about himself, about humans, about what they could achieve when they refused to give up. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the noble faces of the Zellery. He was used to seeing them as enemies.
Ow.
But now he saw something different. He saw a people who could change, who could choose something better. As Arya stepped forward, Ray felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see General Karn, the loyal Zellery officer who had joined their cause. Giving him a nod of encouragement, the air was heavy as Arya walked toward her mother, her steps echoing through the silent hall. "Ray," she said softly, looking at him one last time before facing the queen. "It's time." Ray nodded, his heart beating loudly in his chest. "We're ready." The queen's eyes were filled with contempt as Arya stood beside Ray, not as a princess and a captive, but as something else entirely. "You have brought this human to my throne room," the queen said, her voice a sharp knife. "Do you think he can change the future of this empire? Do you think a mere human can save us from ourselves?" Ray stood tall, looking directly at the queen. His voice was steady as he spoke. "I don't want to save your empire, Queen Zealand," he said. "Want to? Show your people a better way. You've ruled with fear, with control. There's more to life than that. There's more to a future than power. The queen's face hardened. You are nothing, she sneered. You are just a weak, small creature trying to play with forces you cannot understand. You have no place in my empire. But Arya stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a new strength. No, mother. He's right. We've been living in the past for too long. The galaxy is changing, the people are changing, and we can either change with them, or we will fall behind. Arya, you have been blind, the queen spat. This human has poisoned your mind. You have become a traitor. The words stung, but Arya didn't flinch. If wanting peace makes me a traitor, then I'll accept it. A deep silence filled the room. Rey felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The queen's eyes were fierce, but there was something else, something in the way she looked at Arya. Was it regret? Was it fear? For a long moment, the queen said nothing. Then her voice broke the silence. You will regret this, she said quietly. Both of you. But Arya stood firm. No, mother. This is the right path. Rey looked at her, proud. He had never seen her this strong. The queen's gaze moved to Rey. You're a fool, she said bitterly. You're a fool to think you can change anything. Rey didn't back down. Maybe we're all fools. But if being a fool means standing up for what's right, then I'll be a fool every time. The tension was thick in the air, but something shifted in the queen's eyes. She had ruled with fear, with absolute control, but Rey's words had shaken her. She could see it in Arya's resolve, Rey's courage. She could see a future. Maybe where things were different, a future where humans and Zellari could stand side by side. She looked at Arya. You have made your choice, daughter. Arya nodded. Yes, I have. 1 year had passed since that day in the throne room. Zellari Prime was no longer the same. The cold silence of the palace had changed. The air felt lighter. The sky looked brighter. And most importantly, the people had begun to think differently. Commander. Rey Carter, the human who had once been seen as a threat, was now a respected name across many worlds. Some called him a rebel, some called him foolish, but most called him a peacemaker. At his side stood Princess Arya Zelan, no longer just the royal daughter of a powerful queen. She was now a leader in her own right, someone who had chosen a path of peace and unity. Even when it meant standing against her own blood, a new council had been formed, the Union of Free Worlds. It was made up of humans, Zellari, and other species who had once been prisoners or enemies. They met often to solve problems through words, not war, inside a wide glass hall on a peaceful moon. The council met today for something special. Celebration today marked 1 year since the day Rey had stood before Queen Zelan and offered her a different future. Rey stood in front of a large crowd. Hundreds of beings, humans, aliens, former prisoners, Zellari nobles filled the hall. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Soldiers and scholars stood side by side. Rey wore a clean black uniform now, but he hadn't changed much. He still carried the same strength in his voice, the same hope in his eyes. He looked at Arya, who gave him a small nod. He turned back. To the people. A year ago, Rey began, I stood in fear before an empire that had the power to destroy me. But I didn't ask for war. I asked for a chance. And because one person, Princess Arya, believed in that chance, we are all standing here today. Applause filled the hall. Some cheered. Others clapped softly with emotion. We were different, Rey continued, but we came together. Had every reason to stay apart, but we didn't. We found strength in peace. And now that peace is growing. In the crowd, a young alien girl whispered to her mother, Is that the human the princess saved? Her mother smiled and replied, No, dear. They saved each other. After the speech, Arya walked beside Rey through the gardens near the council hall. The trees were tall, and the wind was soft. Birds from many worlds sang in harmony. Do you still miss Earth? Arya asked. Rey smiled. Sometimes, but I think I found something better. Arya raised an eyebrow. Really? Rey nodded. Earth gave me life. But here, I get to shape a future. With you, Arya looked away for a moment, trying to hide the warmth in her face. You always say the right thing, Ray. Ray grinned. It's because I believe it. They walked. In silence for a few minutes, side by side. No guards, no throne. Just two people who had once stood on opposite sides, now walking together as equals. Far away on Zellery Prime, Queen Zaelyn stood on her high balcony. She had not attended the council meeting. She rarely left the palace now. Her empire was still. Large, but it no longer ruled with the same fear as before. She had given power to Arya with full trust. But with silent agreement, she had seen her daughter grow. She had seen the galaxy begin to shift. In her hand, she held a message from Arya. You can still join us. It's not too late. The queen stared at the words. She said nothing, but she didn't tear the message. She simply placed it on the table and watched the stars. Maybe one day, in the weeks that followed, more planets joined the Union. Old enemies became new allies. Trade began between species that had once fought. Schools were built where children of different worlds learned side by side. Songs were sung in many languages. Flags of different colors flew together. Still, it wasn't easy. Some Zellari nobles plotted in secret. Some humans feared betrayal. Not everyone believed in this new future, but every time a fight began, Ray and Arya would step forward, not with weapons, but with words. They reminded the people of why they had started. Peace is not weakness. Ray once said in a council, debate, it's the greatest strength we can choose, and Arya added. Change does not destroy our past. It gives it meaning. One evening, on a quiet planet full of green hills and glowing rivers, Ray and Arya sat with a group of children from different species. The children laughed and played, building towers with glowing blocks and chasing small robot birds. A small, alien boy with bright orange eyes sat beside Arya and tugged at her sleeve. Princess, can I ask you something? He said. Arya smiled. Of course. The boy pointed at Ray. Why do you call him your partner? He's not Zellari. He's human. The question was honest. There was no hate in the boy's voice and the curiosity. Arya looked at Ray, who gave her a wink. She turned back to the boy and said gently, because he stood with me when no one else did. Because he believed in a better world? Because he showed me that hearts are stronger than blood? The boy nodded slowly, trying to understand. Then another child, a young human girl, added, and because they love each other, all the children burst into laughter. Ray blushed. Arya rolled her eyes but smiled. Maybe the future would be okay after all. That night, as the stars sparkled above, Ray and Arya sat quietly outside, watching the sky. We really did it, Arya whispered. Ray leaned back and said, no, we're still doing it. One step at a time. She nodded. Do you think the Queen will ever forgive us? Ray looked up. Maybe, maybe not. But we didn't do this to be forgiven. We did it because it was right. Arya reached for his hand and held it gently. Together. She asked. Ray smiled. Always. And under the stars, a princess and her human partner began the next chapter of their story, not with a battle, but with peace, hope, and the belief that even the coldest empires could learn to change.